Hi, and welcome. My name is Stacy Fletcher. I'm with the Pro Mindset Academy, and I am here today with Ali Berry and Kasey Crawford, two collegiate coaches. And we are going to talk about their experiences of using the services and the work that we're doing here with mindset training and mental health training and coaching, and what their experiences have been with it. So welcome, Kasey. Welcome, Ali. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Can you each just do a brief introduction of yourself?
My name is Kasey Crawford. I'm the head gymnastics coach at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. We're a Division III university, and I was also an assistant coach there and an athlete there, so that's kind of my background.
What about you, Ali? Go ahead.
My name's Ali Berry, and I'm the assistant gymnastics coach at UW-La Crosse, and I was also an athlete there and a coach for 5 years. So.
Awesome. All right. So tell me, how did you end up, getting involved with doing mindset training, this kind of work?
Personally, it's always been a passion of mine. I mean, since I was an athlete and assistant coach, we've always infiltrated mental training. My first year head coach, we used someone that we had in the past, and I loved my relationship with him, but we just weren't really getting to some of the heart of things, and it just wasn't the right connection. And Ali had gone to Southern Utah's camp where Amy had been and was said, hey, you know what? One of our athletes said, like, the best part of the camp was the sports psychologist who was there. And I was like, oh, I've been looking for more resources. It's really hard to know, like, there's so many emails you get from people, and it's like, it's really hard to know what's good and like what's not. Yeah. And I was like, give me your name, I'd love to use her sometime. And so we had an athlete who was really scared. She had just come back from an Achilles injury, and she was just really cautious on a lot of things. And that was the first time I took Amy a little card that had Amy's name on it. And I said, hey, would you do this? And I hear she does the first 30 minutes for free. That was kind of what got me plugged in. I hear she does the first 30 minutes. And the athlete ended up not taking it. They ended up kind of doing the like, yeah, I would love that. But then they were like, I don't really need that. And so then we kind of had a break, and then we had another athlete who had this severe mental block. And I said, would you be willing to try this out? I hear that she's pretty good. And at the time, I really didn't have any other options. I didn't know what to do. And she said, yeah. And so she did her session with Amy. They were able to record the first session so that I could just hear it. And both me and the athlete were like blown away by how different it was. And like, instantly the athlete felt relief. I felt like I learned more in that 30-minute session than I had from like any other sports psychologist. Like, it was totally different. And honestly, from there, I was just bought into it.
What would you say was different from your initial impressions? I know you've had a lot more time with it since, but if you can remember back.
I think what's different is like, they just ask the right questions that one, validate the athlete. And then two, like, they allow them to, or the way it's done, like the CTFAR allows the athlete to really figure it out themselves and feel more empowered in the situation, rather than kind of telling them what to do. Like, hey, here are some keywords you could do, or here's visualization. It was like a conversation that allowed the athlete to truly speak what was on their heart and to get to the bottom of the cause that was causing it. Yeah. And once they dealt with that, then the athlete was empowered and they could take the steps they needed to do. And so it was like allowing the coach to figure out what the cause is, which solves the whole problem, rather than just like these kind of surface level tools.
That makes a lot of sense. Ali, what about you? How did you first kind of get involved?
Well, like Kasey said, I was an intern at Southern Utah University and learning a bunch of spotting and coaching, and Amy was there at the camp, and the coaches at SU were awesome, and Amy had us spoke with their college team, and they allowed me to sit in on it. And I heard a lot of what she was teaching when it comes to separating a fact of what's going on versus all the thoughts that are going on in the athlete's head, and how different athletes could have different thoughts about the same exact skill, right? There's one skill and they could have different thoughts about that same skill, and that kind of creates your results. And it was, once again, like Kasey said, super empowering. And I was like, oh, this is a really unique way to look at it. It just kind of was more tangible. This is something I can actually do and actually work on. And so I thought it was a really cool idea. And then to back it up, to have one of the athletes say that their favorite part of camp, I mean, she was like a young high school athlete, right? For them to say their favorite part of camp was Amy Twiggs, I was like kind of caught off guard. I was like, oh, I mean, that's awesome, but like, but why? And she just told me that she would have never gone for some of the skills that she went for if she hadn't talked to Amy. And Amy just walked around the gym and would talk to an athlete when they were going to try something new. They set all these goals, which she also loved. She's like, but it like actually helped me take the steps to reach my goals rather than just being like, oh, by the end of camp, I want to do this. Hopefully it magically happens. Right.
Yeah.
So Amy like really helped her like take those steps to actually achieve those goals. And it was just really awesome to hear. And that's when I was like, I have to tell Kasey, like, how cool is this?
That's awesome.
And that's what I think I love about, coaching is all about positive thinking, positive, thoughts. And this is about thoughts that serve you.
Yeah.
And which is really more real for athletes who, especially in the sport of gymnastics, where things are scary. There's no denying that we can get majorly hurt by some of the things that we do. And you can't just be positive. Like it's not believable. They're scared. And that's what I think was different about this was like, it ends up being positive thinking, but it's designed to help them figure out thoughts that just serve them and fit that particular athlete, which I think as coaches, we don't do a very good job of meeting kids where they're at. And so that's why I felt this was different.
Yeah. What were some of your reservations? And just to put a little note for those of you who might not know, so Amy Twiggs is one of the founders of Pro Mindset Academy, one of our head coaches here. And so she originally worked with Ali and Kasey a few years back. So as she's not here with us today, I wanted to acknowledge her. But what were some of your initial like hesitations about starting to work with Amy and bringing her in and that kind of?
The first one, of course, was just the finances. We're Division III school. It's not like I'm just filled with tons of money and can, fork over things whenever I want to. And it was awesome when it was like, okay, we can do these like free sessions. That's great. And then when she said like the actual price, I was like, well, I'm not sure I'm that committed, because it's just hard. And especially I was a younger coach. I didn't totally know my budget that well. It was just hard to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah. And I want to insert in there.
Honestly, then it was just doing a couple sessions like that to realize it was going to be worth every penny. Like the second year, I could have done like a cheaper package that was like group oriented. And I was like, no, I want the individual sessions and I want to pay the full price because I felt it was that worth it.
And just, so to insert in here, at that time, you were hiring Amy as kind of your private coach for your team versus what we've created in Pro Mindset Academy now is a way for more teams to have access to this training in a different way. And the reason is because so many people are in the place that you were at where they see the importance of needing this, but just couldn't afford it. And so we've tried to really find a way that makes it actually reasonable.
Yes. So that was one reservation. The second one is I think in general, we all have brains that want to just say like, oh, I don't know, I need that. It's change. I don't really know what it means. It's just a little worrisome. And I mean, I started mine in the middle of my season. That was like a total risk. And it worked. Like that's all I can say back to people is that it's not going to just totally change everything. It can make an immediate impact.
Yeah.
With a 30-minute session.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have any hesitations, Ali?
I think that just in general, whenever we start thinking about sports psychology and someone else talking to our athletes and things like that, we have a fear of the athlete starting to overthink. And I think that was like one of the things that Kasey and I had talked about. Like, we really want them to get this mental coaching and stuff, but like, I don't want them to even like be overthinking even more because we're sending them to them for overthinking. Like it felt like one of those situations. That was absolutely not what happened. Like Kasey said, she took the risk and we found out that it actually gave them control over their thinking. They were overthinking and they had a lack of control over it. And now it kind of gave them this like recognition and control. And so it actually did not make them overthink. So I think that was the biggest thing that we had discussed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of coaches, feel that way where these athletes have been entrusted to you. And so to entrust them to someone else feels risky. So I think that makes a lot of sense. How so with that, you know, speaking to a coach that is in that position, that's kind of more in the place of like, I don't know if I really want to entrust, you know, their brains somewhere else. Like that's such an important part of it. What would you say to them?
You don't know until you try.
Yeah.
I mean, plain and simple. It's like you just don't know until you try. Um, and second, like I said, you know, the biggest fear is that it's going to change something or that it's going to cause your athletes to overthink, which can really happen with other sports psychologists. And this does the opposite. It literally does the opposite. And the other end of it, it's not just mindset training, but there's more mental health issues. There's depression, there's anxiety. I deal with way more of that than I deal with a mental block on a skill. And this can help that. I say like it's cognitive behavioral therapy that a coach could understand and apply on a daily basis.
That's
which
awesome.
Without being a therapist, we know we're not therapists, but it allows you to have some of those tools. And with normal sports psychology or mental training, it wouldn't even touch on that kind of thing. And this can help that too. That's how different it is.
That's awesome. Yeah. I also think too, like coaches are really put in this position where they're expected to be experts on everything because, you know, sport takes so much more than just training on that specific skill set. It also takes nutrition and it takes mental health and it takes, you know, mindset training, psychology tools, you know, and even within a sport. So like within a sport, we have the understanding that having specialists, you know, that this person is a specialist. So if you guys are gymnastics coaches, this is the bars coach, this is the beam coach. You know, in football, you have your different coaches that are coaching different things. And we can kind of understand within coaching the sport that having that specialized skill set can really help make a difference. And I think this is the same thing where you can relieve yourself of having to be the specialist in mental health and in mindset, sports performance, sports psychology, and let someone else be the specialist for that part of it without feeling like you're not doing your job, because I think it's unrealistic for one person to be able to do all of those things.
Yes. And that I totally had to be convinced of, because of course I'm that person like, well, I'm going to be great at everything, you know, and it took, you know, kind of Amy to say, you could do it, but your life is going to be a lot better if you let other people help you, you know? And I think that's just really true. I mean, that's another piece of advice for coaches is we want to have a hand in everything. And it's important for us to learn. Like, you wouldn't want to be totally blind to having someone come in and not knowing what they're doing. Like, you want to be a part of it. Yeah. But in the end, hands down, it is so much better when I can have my athletes go to somebody else, because I have a subjective mind. I know what I want. And so that ruins the conversation. Then if they can just go to an objective person who has no idea what's going on, it is significantly more beneficial.
Yeah, that's good. So, okay, you kind of got deep into the work of, so tell me, just tell me any of, so we've talked about your hesitations, we've talked about why you did it. How did it affect, let's start first. Right now, mental health is such a huge thing. So how has it helped with the mental health aspect of working with your athletes?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is the athletes have just never been taught how to deal with the emotions that they have. They don't even know what they are. It's hard for them to name them. And I dealt with it personally. My first couple of years as a coach, I had like major anxiety and I didn't even know. And so that's how it all started, was like, I remember the first thing I came to personally for Amy was like, I just want my anxiety to go away. Like, I am just really anxious all the time. And learning about emotions has been one of the best things I've taken from this whole program, and probably what I do most often in my office. Like, when an athlete comes in, it's because they're stressed. They're really homesick. They're really anxious about what their friends think of them. They're really depressed because they're not happy and they miss home. Like, I mean, it's mental health. And for me, a lot of what I've been taught and what you guys do here is just helping them breathe through that emotion and like just say it's okay. Like, helping them to embrace that negative emotion. And I think they've never been taught that.
Yeah. Our society hasn't been taught that, not just athletes. Like, but I think athletes especially are taught how to numb, or like how to not feel. and the ideal thing for an athlete is to not feel emotion. But that's actually impossible.
Yeah.
That they always sneak back up in some way, shape, or form. And so learning how to actually physically, emotionally process an emotion through is just not, where none of us are taught how to do that. And we should be. It should be like third grade. All right.
Yep.
This
Yep.
is how you do
and that's
it.
what I see. My little kindergartner does. Sometimes they have like these little emotion lessons, and I'm like, yeah. And I think as people get older, they think talking about emotions is a bunch of crock, right?
Yeah.
Like they think it's lovey-dovey, therapist-y, like, and it's just so vitally important to our health. And so that's in regards to mental health, that's one of the biggest things I've learned that we implement. And it's really organic. It happens in the moment. I don't think it's something that is super beneficial in some kind of lecture that you're going to give them. It's like they have to feel that moment when they are so homesick and all they want to do is go home because they're in college and they miss their mom and dad. And for me to meet with them and learn how to say, it's okay. Like, this is part of life. Like, that negative emotion is normal. You are not strange. You don't have to be embarrassed about this, right? Like, and helping them do it in the moment.
Yeah.
That's why this is so different.
Yeah. That's good.
And I want to point out that by Kasey doing this, the athletes wanted to come to her. And so then instead of them suppressing all of these emotions like they would normally do, and it shows up in the gym at practice, right? And you're like, what is going on with this person? And you have no idea. It just opened up this line of communication. So Kasey did know, and she knew how to help them. And it made this just line of communication open up that was so beneficial for their gymnastics and for their mental health.
Yeah. Such a beautiful picture, honestly, of, I think it's such a different, I mean, so many of us as, I was a coach at club level. So many of us, like we want to be that coach that can support our athletes, but without really knowing how, it does turn into where our athletes are just afraid of us, and especially of the head coach. And then and it comes out in their gymnastics, it comes out in the interactions between us as their coach. And so really to be able to change that's really beautiful.
Well, and I think my first year, in my second year before I really knew any of this stuff, it wasn't beneficial. Like when an athlete came in and they're telling me their life problems, I sit there and listen, which is great. But it was like nothing really got solved. Like nothing really, like I didn't really know, I didn't have the tools to help them. I was just that listening ear, which is great. It's great to have that listening person. But in the end, it was like, why would they want to come back? Because they still felt like crap at the end, and their gymnastics still wasn't taken off. It still wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. I was being a nice listening person, but, for the coach to have a few tools to just help them in that moment, oh my gosh, it made a world of a difference.
Yeah, that's huge. So let's turn to actual sports performance. We are definitely, the tools that we have are used for sure for mental health training, but also combined with some of the best sports psychology tools and using those same tools for sports performance. So how did you experience that?
Well, can I just start with, I just always thought it was so funny that somebody would have a practice, and at the end of practice, all of us coaches would go up to Kasey and be like, did she meet with Amy today? Like, she had a really good day. Like, and it was just like that, like you could just see it. And whether it was just they felt like the weight was lifted off of them when they were doing their gymnastics, or whether they were like working through a mental block, whatever it was, I just felt like we just always knew when that person had a session with Amy, because it was just that instant.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it.
Literally. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. I mean, there's so much that we've learned, but one of the most crucial things I've taken is, as coaches, we learn about cue words and positive affirmations. And so, I don't think that's new to anybody, but one thing that I learned in this program that's different is a way, again, to get to the athlete's cause, what's actually causing the problem, allowing you to like help them figure it out more. So let's say someone's really scared. We had an athlete, the first athlete that went through this was afraid of her switch ring on the high beam. And for, to just break it down, say, tell me the 5 things that you need to think about in a switch ring again. And again, that kind of is like the overthinking. We would never think about 5 things during a switch ring, but the lead into it, the step, where the switch is, where your arms go, your head, back, just to really outline it for the athlete. and then ask the athlete, what is most important for you? Like, what are you really scared of? And what part of that is like most scary for you, you know? And what is the thing that's really going to help you, and learning how to narrow it down, and then getting it to one word, and then getting it to the body part that you need to do it correctly. Like, it's so much more specific than what we've ever been taught as a coach. You know, I think in the past keywords are like, oh yeah, make sure you say, you know, square hips, straight back. I can do this. And this is like, oh no, you need to be way more specific than that.
Yeah.
And once you get to that one specific word, it's like magic.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden they're like, I get it. Like, I'm not afraid at all. I can, every single time I can do this.
Yeah.
And that part is what's really different. And so it's using the tools that most coaches know, but being way more specific with it, utilizing it in a way that you're empowering the athlete for the first time, and getting to the cause.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think another tool that I've seen work really differently in that is something that you referred to at the very beginning, which is teaching them the difference in the different parts of their brain. And so there's this primal part of your brain that's job is to keep you safe. And it actually doesn't work very well. It tells us a lot of things are dangerous that aren't dangerous. But in the area of gymnastics, it's telling us something that is dangerous that is actually dangerous. And so trying to convince your brain that it's not dangerous when it is dangerous is pretty futile. But that's actually what we teach people. That's exactly what we teach. Like, you just got to just shut that off. And so learning how to kind of dialogue with that part of your brain, how to feel the fear, how to make fear not a big deal. Fear doesn't mean anything that has gone wrong. How to process it. Just because you're afraid doesn't, like, be afraid. That's okay. It's just your brain trying to keep you safe. And now we're going to say, thank you, brain. That's noted. This is what we're doing. Feeling fear is not a big deal. I'm not afraid to be afraid, and I can do that. And I think that's very different than anything I did with my athletes. You know, I was much more like trying to convince them, like, you're safe. You've done this 1,000 times. Look at all the times you did it on the low beam. Look at all the times you've done switch rings on the floor. You've built up, like, you're safe. They're not safe.
Yep.
And that's okay. Nothing has gone wrong with that. And they can, like, work through that, and it's totally not a big deal.
The number one thing that I learned, and you hit it spot on, was like how to validate an athlete. And I think we grew up in a world where our coaches didn't intentionally do that, but they were like invalidating us. They were trying to say you can do it when we were scared, or, you know, like, but to just acknowledge, hey, you're afraid, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That thought in itself makes an athlete go for the skill.
It doesn't make any sense, right?
But it does. And, you know, the other one that really I just got to be in a good way, you know, I always have the athletes come back and say, I don't know. You know, like, why aren't you going for that? I don't know. You know, and I always, as a coach, I would get stuck, and I'd be like, they don't know. And
if they don't know, I can't help them.
I got taught, you know, hey, just say, if you had a guess, what would you say?
Yeah.
And that has opened up so many doors just by knowing to say, if you had to guess. And all of a sudden they have 3 different things of why their day was bad, or they've always been afraid of this. It's like the honesty door opened up.
Yeah.
Because I just said, if you had to guess.
Yeah. What would it be? Yeah. Totally. In your actual results, Kasey, like, how did you see this play out sports performance wise?
I think it just made a world of a difference. I mean, I don't think we would have had any of the success we did without having the athletes go through this. And if they were asked, they'd be like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, because they don't realize it, because they think they were the ones who made the change, which was true. Like, that's the whole purpose of it, is that they were the ones creating the change for themselves. And that's why it was so beneficial.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, just half of we ended up having a lot of mental blocks, a lot of mental health issues. I mean, if I wouldn't have had these tools, it would have been a disaster this year. I mean, it really would have been. Yeah. And I think we were mentally the strongest place we've been at the end of the season in my 4 years as a head coach. So yeah, I think it was in a better place.
How has it changed, and you can both speak to this, the experience of coaching I'll lead in by kind of leading it a little bit in saying, I think one of the things that I've seen coaches struggle with the most, especially in gymnastics, it plays out a little differently in other sports, is when you don't know how to help them, you're left with very few resources in how to motivate them. So, and often it can come back feeling like it's, it's against you. So in the world of gymnastics, we end up using a lot of fear. We end up using a lot of punishment. You're going to go do, you're going to run for 20 minutes if you don't go for the skill. You're going to do extra strength if you don't go for the skill. The things, and those are the tools that were used with us, and those are what we know to use. But I think, the frustration builds. Why aren't they going for this? Why aren't they doing it? They used to be able to do this and they're not. Are they just flouting me? Are they disrespecting me? I just think there's a lot of emotions that come into your role as a coach and your experience of coaching the athlete without these kinds of tools. So how has it changed kind of that experience for you?
That part was a huge part for me, because as a head coach, I have to be the one that instills like the consequences or boundaries, or, and in learning about not punishing, but having boundaries was really important, and having a different way of phrasing it. Like in the past, when something was going on, it's like, you might go up to an athlete and say, if this kind of keeps going, you're not going to be in the lineup, which of course to them is like, like just total heart rate racing, very, not a good situation, even though it's the honest truth, right? Like, right. Still want to be honest. So again, phrasing it to a boundary of like, your position in a lineup is here once you decide to take the steps that I've been asking for. The exact same thing, but worded differently. Yeah. That was the biggest thing I learned as a head coach. And that to me is a difference between like consequence punishment and boundaries. And learning how to use boundaries. And it made a world of a difference just in how I phrased things. Yeah. Yeah. And that was a big learning curve for me this year. And I felt it made a big difference in a positive way. Yeah.
I would say it was really beneficial when an athlete isn't making the changes that you're trying to help them make. You start questioning yourself as a coach sometimes. Like, am I even telling them the right things? Or like, am I saying this wrong? Or like, you can start questioning yourself and getting in your own head. Like they talk about getting in their own head, right? You start getting in your own head as a coach. And this has really given me the tools, I think, to stay out of my own head and to just talk to that athlete and just like get to the root of the problem in that moment too. Because maybe it has nothing to do with me trying to get them to get their chest up before they twist, right? Maybe there is something completely different going on that we can talk about in a completely different way. And it just helps you have those conversations without it being like, you're not doing what I'm telling you. It's like, okay, this is what I want from you, like, and like actually like having a conversation around it. And then it ends up being like finding a cue word or, getting them to a place of what motivates them, right? Yeah. Or whatever it is for that athlete. But I thought it was much easier to have those conversations and actually be able to provide them with the ability to give them the tools to do it, to make those changes, rather than just being like, well, you're not trying to make them. Usually they're trying, right? We believe they're trying. We like to believe they're trying. And so then they're getting frustrated and you're getting frustrated. And so you can actually work through those issues.
And I think Ali and I both came from pretty good coaching in regards to, we didn't have a huge phase of like having to get rid of the old, like, if you do this, you suck, and you have, 20 rope climbs, like I had that when I was a little younger, but for the most part, I had a pretty healthy culture from gymnastics. So I didn't have as much of a transition going to this because it was what I believed in. But sometimes it could be a pretty different mindset change.
Yeah. So that leads into the final thing I want to chat about. I know one or the other you has mentioned kind of sometimes the difficulty of athletes coming in from cultures that were less healthy. And so, one of the things we want to do is change the culture from the inside out. And by the inside, we mean each person's inside. And so I think it can be easy to see why this kind of program might be beneficial for a college program. But how would you talk about it or see that for a club program within the gymnasts that you're recruiting to come be on your team?
I think my first piece of advice would be, don't you want to be one of the leaders in regards to the changes we're trying to make in USA Gymnastics?
Mm.
This allows you to be at the forefront of it, to be ahead of the curve. It is that life-changing to our culture. It's that life-changing to each individual athlete, and you could be the club that gets to be the leader of it.
Yeah.
That to me would be my biggest advice, because we need a major culture change. You know,
Yeah.
the documentary Athlete A is coming out, I think, in a week. You know, it's going to be finally on people's minds again. I know at USA Gymnastics, they're trying to finally talk to mental health therapists and mental, sport mindset trainers and stuff. And they're trying to make these changes, but in the end, the clubs have to jump on. They have to be the ones that start the action.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity to do that.
That's awesome. I also, you mentioned at one point, like having a gymnast, or for those of you who are coaches of other sports, having an athlete who has this kind of training in their pocket makes them somebody you would really see as valuable to bring onto your team.
Yes. When I get emails from recruits and they said, hey, during quarantine, I did mental training with somebody every single week, or I really focus on my mental training and my mental health. And I mean, it exponentially makes me want to pick them more, because one, they see that it's important. I don't have to go through this buy-in with them. And then they've had some experience with it, which always makes a difference,
Yeah.
So as a college coach, knowing that the athlete who could be coming to me has already had some experience in this is so, it is like, I want them.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us. Any final things to say to wrap up?
I don't think so.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.